Welcome aboard Rocket Ship, the platform with the most relevant content for competitive examinations. This is Rocket Ship IAS Lab and continuing with our series on answer writing for general studies papers of civil service main examination. We take up a question that you might encounter in GS paper 1. Here goes the question. Musical instruments are a mainstay of Indian art and sculpture with their own symbolism. Elaborate. The question is a fairly simple one, that is how musical instruments are central to, that is they are a mainstay of Indian art and sculpture, and this it is the, you could say, the fine print of the question that they have their own symbolism that you have to focus while answering this question. In fact, can sense a certain irony in this question, that how are musical instruments which are often associated with the performing arts, you can understand very well that the musical instruments are associated with the performing art of music, but here we are talking of their being mainstay of Indian art and sculpture. Sculpture is not a performing art. In fact, it is it's, you could say, it's part of something else, it's part of something more tangible. Anyway, the point is, we are introducing our answer with going into a particular concept of Indian music, that is the concept of Nad Brahm. The concept of Nad Brahm, which means the divine origins of sound, or you can say the concept of Nad Brahm, the principle of Nad Brahm says that the sound itself is divinity. It was developed in the proto-historic period with the Vedas themselves mentioning musical instruments like the veena. Most of the Vedic scholars, they actually say that the Vedas mention some musical instrument which is akin to, which is, you could say, similar to the modern day veena. The musical instruments were used not only to build tempo of musical performance, but also accompanied yogic practices as a practical aid to induce trance. Trance means deep meditation. So the musical instruments have been used variously in Indian context. One of the, you could say, more common use is to, you could say, build tempo or build rhythm in a musical performance. On the other hand, they have also been used to, you could say, induce deep meditation. It's a common observation that listening to instrumental music often leads to, you could say, one falling into deep trance, deep meditation. Bharat Muni's Natya Shastra, which is variously dated to 2nd to 3rd century BC, maybe even earlier, it classified musical instruments into 4 groups. What are these 4 groups? What are the classes that Bharat Muni had classified the musical instruments into? First come the Avanad, which are the percussion instruments, like the modern day damru, or for that matter the drum. Then come the ghan vadya or the ghan instrument, which are solid, mostly of metal, for example the modern day cymbals. Then the third category of instruments was the susir vadya or the susir instruments, which are the wind instruments, which would obviously include the modern day flute, or for that matter the shahnai. The fourth category was the tantu vadya or the stringed instruments, like the veena, or for that matter the guitar, etc. All of these can be categorized under the tantu vadya or the stringed instruments. This is actually a fairly simple instrument. Concept. You must have observed that mostly the musical instruments are of these 4 types. Anyway, with the emergence of icon making, which you probably understand that it was around the early centuries of the Common Era, musical instruments too started being depicted in art and sculpture of India. One notable aspect that is you should actually focus on, you should note that one notable aspect about depiction of musical instrument is they accompany particular deity and seldom alone. The point we are driving here that musical instruments are depicted in Indian art and architecture, but it's very very rare that they are depicted alone. But most of the time they are depicted in the context of or like accompanying a particular deity, and they often symbolize some particular, you could say, aspect of that deity. Moreover, the instruments carry certain meaning, that is the symbolism that they carry. Almost all the four categories of instruments mentioned by Bharat Muni are depicted in Indian art and architecture and sculpture. First, let us start with the percussion instruments. The damru, which is a percussion instrument, it, as you know, it is often depicted in the Savaite context, in the Savaite themes, including the Nataraj iconography. From here, from the practice of Savaite, you could say, devotees, it has permeated into the tantric cults, into the tantric themes, and through tantric themes, going through tantric themes, it was again transmitted to Tibetan Buddhism, Vajrayana. So it's not as if the musical instruments are depicted only in the Hindu context, but also among the other sects of India, including Buddhism, through which it has transmitted to Tibetan Buddhism, that is Vajrayana. And this deity, the deity who is depicted holding the damru, is often, you could say, it's one of the inspiration. It is inspired. This deity in Tibetan Buddhism is often considered to have been inspired from the Hindu Shiva. Then comes the conch. The conch is often depicted in the Vaishnavite contexts, and one of the important, you could say, context in which the conch is depicted is as the Ayudh Purush. While we would discuss it later in detail what the Ayudh Purush mean, but you might recall that in one of our earlier lectures we have talked about the practice of depicting, you could say, particular weapons, the celestial weapons of the gods as persons, which is anthropomorphic depiction of the celestial weapons. An example would be Sudarshan Chakra depicted as a minor deity. We would repeat it. The practice of Ayudh Purush is depiction of the celestial weapon of a deity as a minor god itself. And one of the examples would be depicting the Sudarshan Chakra, or for that matter, the conch, the Panchjanya conch, as a minor deity in, you could say, accompanying the main deity in the Buddhist, in the Vaishnavite temples. Then coming to the stringed instruments, the veena, it is often identified with the goddess Saraswati. Last comes the flute, which is centerpiece of, it is central to Krishna iconography. This question has already been asked by UPSC around 2012. Now, elaborating on these points, damru, which is the two-headed percussion instrument, is a fixture of Shavite art, variously interpreted as mimicking the clamor of the involution of universe, that is the pralaya. That is, it is said that the sound of the damru mimics the pralaya period, that the involution of universe. The instrument is represented in Tandava dance depiction as well as the Nataraj iconography. The practice of depicting damru in the Savaite context goes back to at least the Pallava period, at least the Pallava iconography. The damru entered the Pallava iconography and continues till date. Coming to the shankh, which is the shell of the gastropod Turbinella. It is actually from a mollusca. Anyway, is part of Vaishnavite iconography. Vishnu, one of the Hindu trinity, is depicted holding his divine conch Panchjanya, whose very name symbolizes the harmony of the five elements, that is earth, fire, water, ether, that is atmosphere or air, or for that matter the space. The conch is central to northern Nagar style of architecture. So as we can see here that the depiction of musical instruments in Indian art is so important that the depiction of the conch is one of the, you could say, highlight of the northern style of architecture. The Panch Janya is depicted as Ayudh Purush. It is often depicted anthropomorphically, that is in the style of a person or a god. A distinctive element or practice that began with Gupta temples like the ones at Devgarh. Veena, the term covering a wide range of stringed or tantu instruments, is centerpiece of the iconography of Saraswati, one of the Hindu goddess trinity. A modern example of this is the Veena playing Saraswati by Raja Ravi Verma. So the point is, it is not as if the musical instruments have been depicted only in the ancient period Indian art and sculpture, but they have been depicted in more modern settings, including by Raja Ravi Verma. The Veena symbolizes the mastery of fine arts. That is, the goddess Saraswati, she is often said to be the presiding deity of the fine arts, and the Veena symbolizes her mastery, or like this is like she is bestower of virtuosity, that is absolute skill in the fine arts, here mostly music. Then comes the flute, which you can understand, it's a wind or susir instrument, has come to be associated with the godhead Krishna, variously interpreted as divine enchantment and complete surrender to Krishna or bhakti. The flute playing Krishna has been depicted in specimens as diverse as Chola bronzes to modern day Tanjore, Mysore and Pichwai styles of painting. We actually provide as many examples as you can to make your answer more readable. That is what we are doing here, that the flute has been depicted in, you could say, specimens quite diverse. For example, Chola bronzes, or for that matter the modern day Tanjore style of painting, Mysore style of painting and Pichwai styles of painting. You might recall that the Pichwai style of paintings come from modern day Rajasthan, from the surroundings of the Nath Dwara temple. So this was all on, you could say, the centrality of depiction of musical instruments in Indian art and sculpture and the symbolism that they often carry. This was all for today. We would reassemble for the next lecture in a few days. As usual, we wish you all the best. Thank you.